From Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, and the home of hot chicken, it's the Rik Altizer Show. Sit back, buckle up. Rik will talk with the movers, shakers, and creators who put Christ in Christian entertainment. He's a man who's clear so the world can hear. Here's Rik Altizer.
Hey, this is Rik Altizer on the Rik Altizer Show. It's part 2 of Rik Roberts' interview of me.
Hey, this is Rik Roberts. You're listening to School of Laughs podcast. I'm back for part 2 with Rik Altizer, the host of the Rik Altizer Show and the producer of many and the director of many of your faith-based films that you see at the theaters today. Rik, we just had our first little segment a minute ago. Learned a little bit about your backstory, which, like comedians, we have lots of ups and downs, lots of false starts maybe, or even complete career arcs that happen in 3 or 4 months sometimes, and then we're like right back to square one. And with age, you start to realize that these aren't wasted years, months, times. These are moments where you can go back and look at specific intersections in your life. You know, one of my things I keep thinking of is like an aha moment is the intersection of either confusion and clarity, or maybe necessity and provision, perhaps. But there are those little pivotal moments where you have to say no to something and yes to something else to start over in a way. So
yeah,
I've known you. I was trying to figure out the first year I met you was probably 2008 or 9 when I was doing some things, maybe some shows at your church at the time, and at that time, you know, you had done all the music stuff. I didn't know about any of that. I knew you as a guy who could help with audio and video. Now, the audio obviously comes from your background, you know, doing your CDs and those things. When did you start doing some video work?
Well, the pivotal moment for me was meeting when the record label folded. Mm-hmm. The president of that label was Kent Songer, who's been on my show, and we decided to partner up. And that was the pivotal moment for me, was that he was the business guy, I was the creative guy. And so we started doing projects together and created a company and basically just came joined at the hip. We just split everything 50-50. And that was my missing piece, was finding the business guy. And he said, you know what, there's a big need in the market right now for kids' music, worship music. All the worship music's for adults. And so I went, kids' music, really? You know, Bruce Springsteen to kids' music.
Right.
Said, well, if I'm going to do cheesy kids' music, by golly, it's going to be the best cheesy kids' music you've ever heard.
Right.
And so we did a series called Worship Jams, and we did it, and we made it for kids. We got it on TV. We got a company out of New York to put it on TV, and they put $2 million into ads on TV, and next thing you know, it's the #1 selling worship record in America, and you've probably never even heard of it, unless, you know, you were a kid in that, you know, in 2006.
Or a parent. Yeah.
Or a parent. It's at Walmart. It's, you know, we did 800,000 units of Worship Jams record. So, I mean, it was all of a sudden, I finally got a success with cheesy kids music. But it was the best cheesy kids music you've ever heard.
No doubt about that.
And so that was the beginning of a new thing for me, was to have this guy who said, look, I can sell this if you can make this, which I never had that before. Everything I made, nobody wanted. Nobody wanted to buy. I learned how to make good music, but I never knew how to make something that someone would take their wallet out and go and pay money for.
And here you are with the guy saying, we've got the demand already, we just need to fill it.
Right. So he was a marketing guy, and he was working with Shonda Pierce, kind of doing all of her marketing, getting all of her CDs in Christian bookstores, doing all the deals with Lifeway and at that time Family Christian stores, getting their deals done. So I started, because we were joined at the hip, I was helping him because he was getting paid as a consultant, so I'm going to help out. So I started getting involved with Shonda. Shonda Pierce, very funny Christian comedian who you know, most of your audience probably knows. Mm-hmm. And I would do things like do some music for her. You know, we do a silly song, and I would record it, as I've done with you.
Right.
You know, fun songs that we've done together. And then I started doing some video stuff with her. My son David, who's been on my show many times, he was doing wedding videos at the time. So I'm watching how he makes these wedding videos, and he's telling stories, and it's like, well, that's pretty easy. I think I could do that. You know, he's showing me what he does, and I've got him. At that time, he was 19 or something, and he's showing me how he does these, seeing what he's doing with these wedding videos, and the cameras are getting better. And so I'm working with Shonda and doing little videos for her. And so she says to me one day, I want to make movies. And I said, well, gosh, I can't do a movie for you, Shonda, but I can do a demo tape. You know, remember back in the day, you know, when we would send a little three-song cassette tape to a record label, and they would hear it. And if they liked it, they would say, let's bring you into the studio and pay some money and have you record a few more songs to see if there's something we want to do. So I said, maybe I'll go on the road with you for a weekend and maybe get 5 minutes. And maybe we'll send that to some movie people, and maybe they'll want to, oh, we like Shonda. Let's see if we can develop something with Shonda. She goes, yeah, that sounds fun. So I went on the road with her. I took a little camera, a Canon T3i camera and a $400 lens, and I put it on autofocus.
Right.
I put everything on auto, right?
Right.
And I knew how to do audio because of my recording, so I knew how to get good audio on her. Mm-hmm. So I had a lavalier with her with a little extension unit that recorded her audio. So I got good, clean audio, and I knew how to get audio off the board when she would go live. So I went on the road with her for a weekend, and came back with 16 minutes instead of 5. Put 16 minutes together, and I'd never really done anything like that. But it was fun, and I noticed it was very similar to producing records. I noticed directing, like a documentary, was very similar to making a record. Same kind of skill set that you would use. It's all about telling a story. With a record, I would say, well, let's all have all the songs sound like this, and every guitar pedal you use, and let's have a cohesive record that makes sense. You know what? I think that song's for another record. I don't think that song's for this record. I think this record needs to be about this. And so I would put like an imaginary target on the wall, and everything needs to go to that target. Every song, every lyric, every guitar chord, every guitar amp you use, and are we going to use vintage sounding stuff, or is it going to be real modern sound? So I wanted to make a cohesive album. Well, that was the same skill set in putting something together video wise, telling a story. What do I want to tell? What's focused? What's our story here? And Shonda was in the middle of, at that point, her daughter had become estranged from her. Her husband was distraught and started drinking and became an alcoholic. And they were separated. And she didn't know what she was going to do with her life. Her daughter wasn't talking to her. Her husband was an alcoholic. She was separated from her husband, been married for 30 years or 32 years, and depressed. And it was just terrible. And so it all came out. Mm-hmm. And in that 16 minutes, you saw it. And then her manager, Andrew Tenenbaum, and herself took me to a pizza place. And they said, I'd made the 16 minutes. And they said, Rick, this is great. We love this. We want you to do this. You need to make this. Shonda said, I don't feel like I can tell this to anybody else. I feel like you're the only... Because we'd had a relationship. We'd known each other for years. She felt safe with me. I was like a mentor in her life, a spiritual mentor, where I would pray for her and try to help her see through all this stuff she was going through. So about 10 minutes of that 16 minutes ended up in our first movie. And so we make a movie, Laughing in the Dark. And as we're filming it, the story gets more involved, and I interview her and her husband. They're separated after our interview. It was kind of like a counseling session. After the interview, they get back together. He has a relapse and literally drinks himself to death and dies as we're making this movie. And so what started out was going to be this behind the scenes of the life of Shonda Pierce turns into this whole other...
Right.
How do you navigate your life as a Christian when everything blows up? How do you navigate that? And so it just became a very powerful... You would think you're going to see this Shonda Pierce. It's going to be this funny. And so it's this funny... I had her comedy... And then I would cut from the comedy to her crying about her terrible marriage and her daughter who won't talk to her, and then her husband who dies. And so you've got this really powerful story mixed with this humor, and you're you're getting the release from the intense story
Sure.
you're going through, I can go to some humor. But it was a whole other kind of movie that I had never done anything like that before.
And when you started that, you have a general timeline of how long it's going to take you. And like you said, the movie completely changed in the middle of it. How long from let's go do this at the pizza parlor to the release date?
3 years.
3 years.
It was 3 years in making it. And the reason it took 3 years was because they were separated. He died. I mean, we couldn't just start filming again.
Right.
Hey, you
need time to mourn.
We probably had a year in there of just Shonda. Her life was just being destroyed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm happy to say she's so much healthier now and doing so much better. As good as you can do being a widow, but it was really hard. And so that's why it took 3 years. Plus, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second because you said, I can help you with the little 10-minute demo or 5-minute demo. It turns into 16. So you stretched a little bit there, but all of a sudden they want you to do a full-length movie. How did you prepare yourself? I saw some of the behind-the-scenes, like how you were organizing information on index cards and then cross-indexing those things, and you were having everything, all the video that you had recorded transcribed, and you had that documented. I guess initially, I would have to assume there were some points where you were pretty overwhelmed, where you're like, I can't say I can't do this, but how can I do this?
Oh, I remember taking a walk with my wife. I was so stressed out because it was going to be something that maybe we'll put on her table, or maybe, and Kent will get it into the Christian bookstores. And so that was going to be what it was going to be. Then it turned into, we're going to get it into theaters. It's going to be in 800 theaters, and we're going to spend $200,000 on marketing. And she had just had a booking agent run off with a bunch of money. And she looks at me and goes, I need $100,000. I'm in $100,000 in the hole. I hope this movie makes money. And we're $200,000 into marketing. And it's all on me, a guy who's never made a movie in his life. And everything is on me.
Yeah, that pressure.
I'm the only guy making it. And I filmed most of it, and now I've got to edit it and put it together. And the pressure was so overwhelming. Because it was like, I don't want to. I hope I don't screw this up. What if I make up something that's terrible? Mm-hmm. What if I really mess this up? So that pressure was really large and there, and that was again just prayer and talking with my wife and her talking me off the ledge.
Yeah.
And my wife has a lot of great advice, and she's very good at that, and that really helped, just having her there. And she has a great understanding of story. I mean, I put in there in the credits, you deserve a editing credit, because my wife looked at the story and looked at what I was doing and really helped me understand this is a love story, mm-hmm. and really helped me be able to focus how to make the movie. But I didn't know what to do. So I was just making up these processes as I went. And later now I realized a lot of people make documentaries like this. I made what now is termed, I didn't know what it was, but people call it a paper edit. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what it was, but I got everything transcribed, went through all the transcriptions, highlighted what I wanted to keep, then took all the highlights, put it in another, collection, went through that and did a second highlight, then took all my highlights and put them on 4x6 index cards, then made a big box of index cards, and then started moving index cards around until I came up with a movie, a storyline that I liked. And then I took those index cards, and then I finally got what I wanted, which I'm calling my paper edit. Mm-hmm. Then I took that, and then I actually made it. I put it all together. What's now I know is called the radio edit, which is we're just going to hear the audio and just putting it together, and then we'll cut it up later. And then I took that to an editor, and who now the ball's rolling. Now it's going to be in theaters, so we hired an editor. And he said, I will not take an solo editing credit on this. This is going to be a co-editing credit, because this is not, you did a rough edit.
You did a lot of work for him.
This isn't just, you made a movie, mm-hmm. and I didn't know how much editing I was supposed to do. I didn't know,
right.
And I showed him what I did, and he goes, Rick, they have usually like teams of like 20 people do what you did here.
Yeah.
You know that, right? I go, no. Usually they have about like 20 people. You look at the credits, the movie credits.
Right.
You know, it's not just one guy's name. It's like a lot of different names.
Yeah.
Doing what you did here.
Yeah. The only thing you farmed out was somebody transcribing it.
That was it.
Everything else you were highlighting, because I saw you in here,
I'm
man.
filming.
It was like a beautiful mind. Like, here's a guy who's, I just need index cards, some tape, and a wall, and I'm going to figure this story out. But through that paper, now I think this is important for our comedians that are listening, my end of the deal, and maybe people out there on your show that are thinking about putting things together. It would be our natural tendency to start editing video immediately.
Right.
And then trying to make it work. But there's a lot of lost hours there if you never use those clips. You were finding the usable audio. Had to be good audio for it to even be in the film.
Right.
And then the video has to accompany that. The story had to fit the arc of the overall movie. I'm sure you'd have times where you had like 10 different index cards all saying the same thing, basically, proving the same point. But you're like, okay, which one proves it the best? And then you had to look at the intricacies and nuances of each of those clips.
Yeah.
And those are all gut feelings as a movie director, producer, editor, where you're trying to get the theme to flow. So I'd imagine a lot of it feels like you can't really bring somebody in side by side and say, you take this, I'll take this, we'll figure it out, because you've got the through line in your mind. And your wife helps you develop that in a way.
Yeah, as I was showing her things, she was saying, well, this is a love story. You know, wow. You know, just that statement. You know, and I don't like that there. I think it should go here, you know. And so she was really helpful with that. But for me, like on a whiteboard, I would write out like 3 acts, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And then I would have little chapters in each act. And so I divided it that way. And then I would move things around with my index cards based on headings and chapters. And so as a comedian, you know, or any kind of writer, you've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you've got a story you want to tell. And you might have certain jokes that work here, certain jokes that work there, and you kind of want a storyline through the whole thing, which I think is so much better than just getting up and telling some jokes. You want it to go somewhere.
Sure.
And to tell a story, which I would love to see more comedians do, where you've seen it before and you know who they are. The top of the game, there's a meaning in all why they put this joke here and why they put it there, and there's an arc to the whole thing. And at the end of the night, you've got this cohesive, amazing, and it all comes together, and it's great, it's funny, but it's also more than that.
Sure.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah. When comedy or movie, any story, song is done correctly, you're taken on a journey. You've got some setbacks. You got moments of hope. Then you got a double setback. Then you've got a new character enters that helps solve you some problems, and then all of a sudden that character gets killed off. Like, there's so many different things that happen. You know what I mean? Let me ask you this. So you're creating this flow chart, mind map kind of outline for your movie. I'm guessing there were probably some parts where you're like, oh, boy, it'd be great to have some video that took me from this point to this point, but I don't have it. How do you, as the director of the movie and as a friend of Shonda or Russ, who you did a movie with, we'll talk about that in a second, do you just suggest, hey, this is what we need, we don't have it, you have a show coming up or a performance or a time we get together and talk about it so I can connect these dots? Does that happen?
Yeah, well, that especially in the Russ Taff movie, we really had that. After we got the radio edit, it's called B-roll. You need, as they're talking, as they're speaking, you need to have some kind of B-roll that goes over it. With Shonda, a lot of what she would talk about would be about her past, her family, and so we would get a lot of photos, and I was scanning in photos, doing all the Photoshop work, taking out all the specks and dust and all that. And we would overlay photos or videos. I would have to go collect videos, old videotapes, VHS tapes, transferring them in. She's talking about being Minnie Pearl at Opryland. Well, I had her on stage as Minnie Pearl at Opryland. So as she's talking about that, so knowing what I need, what I have, that's always part of the editing process, is finding that B-roll to go over it. And with Russ, we actually had to go and shoot some. We were 3 weeks into the edit, and I had to go film it. But that's part of what makes it. You get the radio edit, which they're just sitting there talking. Your story is there, everything's there, but they're just people sitting talking, looking into the camera, and it's just boring. okay, I got to have something. I got to show something here. I don't just want to show Russ talking. And a lot of times, Russ would think it would say something, then there'd be a pause. Then he would say something, then it'd be a pause. And so I had to cut all that to tighten him up.
Right.
So I would need to cover that with something, because you just don't want to see him jumping around. It's called a jump cut. You don't. So that would be the B-roll for that. Now with Shonda on her comedy, what was so great was I filmed her show, let's say 7 different times. I had 7 versions of her show. I didn't have multi-camera shoot because it was just me. So I had one camera in the back of the thing filming her, just a straight shot. That's all I had of each show. So what I could do was I could take the same joke that she told 7 times, and I could cut it. You know, I would want to tighten up her jokes a little bit. Well, in Paducah, she said this line real good, but the punchline in Ohio was great.
Right.
And the middle section in Dallas was better. So I could take, from the 7 different shows, I could take one joke and I could show it 7 different ways. She's telling the same joke. So as an editor, I could make it faster. I could tighten it up. I could give the best punchline, the best delivery. And it made it look like it was this big, huge thing. It's like, here she is in Dallas. Now here she is in Ohio. Now here she is in Indiana. And so the one joke is told from 7 different locations. That's only because I didn't have multiple cameras.
Right.
See, when you tighten up on a live show, I've got a straight on shot, and then I need to cut that section because there's a break or it's not as funny, and so you would cut to a side shot, right? And you're actually cutting stuff out, but I'm using different cameras. Well, I couldn't do that on the first movie. I didn't have multiple cameras.
Right.
I had to go to a different night. I had to actually go to a different show. But it worked great because it made it look like it was a bigger budget, made it look like she's a bigger deal because we got 7 different shows in one night.
Sure.
Makes it look like she's all over the world.
Well, it tells a little mini story inside there without saying anything extra.
And I was able to tighten up her jokes, and it made it funnier. So I've never seen anybody do that. And again, I did it just because I had limitations. But I think for a comedian to film his set multiple nights and with different sets, different outfits, I mean, it wasn't like we were trying to fake it, same set, same outfit. Right. It was different hairdos. I mean, it was totally, but to tell the same joke 5 different ways, that way you can cut and paste, you can tighten it up. And it made for, I thought, a very interesting look, which we were just doing by mistake. Again, I had no idea what I was doing, but it made it faster, more exciting, more energetic, made it look bigger, made it look like she was this huge deal because she's all over the place. And I was able to get the best bits from each part, which I thought really worked real well. Then that coupled with this amazing story to go with it that was really intense. And she's talking about, my manager telling me my kids will be happier that they got a new car than they were with having a mom home. And then she stops and then she starts crying and he was dead wrong. And you just see that, boom, you see that moment where she's realizing, oh my gosh, I wasn't there for my kids. There's so much stuff going on. I feel so guilty, blah, blah, blah. Then from there to go right to another funny thing was a very interesting way to make a movie. And again, not knowing what I was doing, it just happened.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like the movies they're super moving, and you often wonder, had I known a lot more, it would have turned out differently. Would it have turned out better, worse? May have been a little bit quicker. Who knows? I'm assuming your second and third movies, with your systems in place now, even though it is a grueling task to put everything together, you know what you're doing. You're not worrying about that part anymore. But the element of you is in there because you didn't go read a book on how to make a movie necessarily. And so you've got your thumbprint on it, which is why when you met Russ through your radio program, the Rik Altizer Show, he was telling you a little bit about him and you got into his movie. That's the most recent one that came out October 30th.
Yes, in theaters October 30th, yeah.
I almost feel like we should do a third part with you.
Okay, I'm there.
I'm
loving this, Rick.
Well, we're telling a story, and I haven't got to the end yet.
Yes.
And I want to kind of, for my listeners who are primarily comedians, talk about the process of releasing a project, marketing, a little bit of that behind the scenes, but also to wrap up kind of the things you've learned across the board from it. So if you don't mind, Rick, I'm going to go into part 3 on mine. It's up to you if you want to go part 3.
It's the Rick and Rick Show. Thank you.
Let's do it.
If there's a show you've missed, you can go to my website, rickaltizer.com, and catch up. Or you can listen to my podcast in iTunes or wherever you hear your podcasts. Just search for The Rik Altizer Show. Altizer is spelled Altizer. I want to thank you for listening. Hey, would you tell a friend about this show and share the love? Be sure to check us out again next week as we discuss how we communicate the gospel through media to our culture. Let's be clear so the world can hear. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.
There is